AZLAN ADNAN, M.A. presents From Ancient American Beans to a British Cupboard Staple, the remarkable origin story of canned baked beans, Wednesday, 5th of August, 2026.
The humble bean, with an extraordinary history. Few foods have become as firmly embedded in British food culture as canned baked beans. Whether served on toast, alongside a full English breakfast, or as a quick and inexpensive family meal, baked beans are often regarded as quintessentially British. Yet almost every aspect of that assumption is historically misleading. The beans themselves originated thousands of kilometers away in the Americas. The slow-cooked bean dish from which modern baked beans evolved was created by indigenous North Americans. The word haricot is French rather than Indian. The familiar term navy bean originated in the United States. Even the earliest commercially canned baked beans first appeared in Boston before eventually conquering British kitchens. The history of canned baked beans is therefore a fascinating story of agriculture, exploration, commerce, military logistics, and industrial food preservation. An American bean, not an Old World crop. The beans used in baked beans belong to Phaseolus vulgaris, commonly known as the common bean. Unlike lentils, chickpeas, peas, and many other familiar legumes of Europe, Africa, and Asia, common beans are entirely New World crops. Archaeological and genetic evidence indicates that their wild ancestors originated in the Americas, with two principal centers of domestication. One developed in Mesoamerica, centered on present-day Mexico, while another evolved independently in the Andean region encompassing modern Peru and Ecuador. These domestication events began several thousand years before the Common Era. Long before Europeans reached the Americas, indigenous peoples cultivated common beans as one of the celebrated three sisters, alongside maize and squash. The three crops complemented one another both agriculturally and nutritionally. Maize provided a natural support for climbing bean vines, beans replenished nitrogen in the soil, and sprawling squash suppressed weeds while conserving soil moisture. Following Christopher Columbus's voyages after 1492, Spanish explorers introduced common beans into Europe. From there they spread rapidly throughout the Old World, eventually reaching Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, including India. Consequently, haricot beans are not indigenous to India. They arrived there only after European contact with the Americas. The curious origin of the word haricot. One persistent misconception claims that haricot derives from an Indian place name. There is, however, no town, village, or region in India named haricot that bears any connection with the bean. Instead, haricot is a French word that entered the language during the 17th century. Linguists continue to debate its precise origin. The strongest explanation traces the word to haricot de mouton, an old French mutton stew whose name probably derived from a medieval verb meaning to cut into pieces. Since beans became a common ingredient in this dish, the name gradually shifted from the stew itself to the beans. Another, though less widely accepted, theory proposes influence from the Nahuatl language of the Aztecs, possibly from the word ayacotl or ayacote. This would reflect the bean's American origins, although definitive evidence remains elusive. Regardless of which explanation ultimately proves correct, neither has any connection whatsoever with India. Why they are called navy beans? Among the numerous varieties of common bean, the small white cultivar known as the navy bean became the classic choice for baked beans. Also known as pea beans, Boston beans, or Yankee beans, navy beans possess several characteristics that made them particularly suitable for both domestic cooking and military provisioning. Their mild flavor readily absorbs seasonings, they retain their shape during prolonged cooking, develop a creamy interior, dry exceptionally well, and can be stored for extended periods without significant deterioration. The name navy bean emerged in the United States during the 19th century after the U.S. Navy adopted the variety as a standard shipboard ration. For sailors undertaking lengthy voyages, navy beans offered several advantages. They were inexpensive, nutritionally rich, high in protein, dietary fiber, iron and B vitamins, and exceptionally shelf-stable. Similar beans also became important rations during the American Civil War. The association became so strong that navy bean entered American English permanently, although elsewhere they remain more commonly known simply as haricot beans or white beans. Indigenous origins of baked beans. Although often regarded as a colonial New England dish, baked beans owe their existence to the culinary traditions of indigenous North America. Peoples, including the Narragansett, Penobscot, and Haudenosaunee, Iroquois, soaked dried beans before slowly cooking them for many hours in earthenware vessels or underground bean holes lined with heated stones. These early recipes commonly incorporated maple sugar or maple syrup for sweetness, together with rendered bear fat, venison fat, or other locally available animal fats. The slow cooking transformed the beans into a rich, creamy, and highly nutritious meal capable of feeding communities through long winters. European settlers arriving in New England during the 17th century readily adopted this cooking technique while modifying the ingredients to suit their own tastes and available supplies. Maple syrup was increasingly replaced by imported molasses or sugar. Wild animal fats gave way to salt pork, bacon, or ham. Traditional earthen cooking pits evolved into heavy ceramic bean pots baked slowly in domestic ovens. Thus emerged the distinctive baked bean dishes that became synonymous with New England. Boston and the rise of Beantown. No city became more closely associated with baked beans than Boston. The city's close involvement in the Caribbean molasses trade ensured abundant supplies of inexpensive molasses, which gradually became the defining ingredient of Boston-style baked beans. Religious practice also contributed significantly to the dish's popularity. New England Puritans observed the Sabbath strictly and discouraged cooking on Sundays. Families therefore prepared large quantities of baked beans on Saturday, allowing them to cook slowly overnight before remaining warm for Sunday's meals. This practical custom reinforced baked beans as a regional staple, and eventually earned Boston its enduring nickname, Beantown. By the early 19th century, published cookbooks were already documenting recipes recognizably similar to today's traditional Boston baked beans. From kitchen to tin, the invention of reliable food canning during the 19th century transformed baked beans from a regional specialty into an internationally traded commodity. Among the earliest pioneers was Henry Mayo and Company of Boston, operating under the name Grocers Packing Company. Experimental production began around 1877, before large-scale commercial manufacture commenced in May 1878. Contemporary reports suggest the factory was producing approximately 8,000 cans of baked beans and codfish balls daily, an impressive industrial achievement for its time. The company's canned baked beans were exhibited at the 1878 Paris Exposition Universelle, attracting widespread international attention and export orders. For this reason, Henry Mayo and Company holds the strongest documented claim to being the first major commercial manufacturer of canned baked beans. Other early manufacturers. Several companies subsequently played important roles in popularizing canned baked beans, although none appears to have preceded Henry Mayo and Company in large-scale commercial production. Gilbert Van Camp's Indianapolis Company, later known simply as Van Camp's, had already become an important commercial canner during the American Civil War, supplying preserved foods to Union forces. The firm later became especially associated with pork and beans in tomato sauce during the 1880s and 1890s. The H.J. Heinz Company entered the market in 1895 and would ultimately transform baked beans into a global brand. Heinz exported baked beans to Britain through the luxury London retailer Fortnum & Mason during the late 19th century, initially positioning them as an imported delicacy before launching wider British distribution in the early 20th century. Burnham and Morrell, B&M, established in Maine in 1867, later became famous for its traditional brick oven baked beans, introducing canned versions during the 1920s. While each company made important contributions to the product's commercial success, Henry Mayo and Company remains the strongest historical candidate for the first large-scale commercial producer. The British transformation. Ironically, the baked beans most familiar to British consumers differ substantially from their American ancestors. Traditional American baked beans are typically cooked in a thick, sweet sauce flavored with molasses, brown sugar, mustard, and salt pork or bacon. British manufacturers gradually developed a lighter tomato-based sauce with significantly less sweetness and, in many cases, without meat. This adaptation proved enormously successful, eventually becoming one of Britain's best-selling convenience foods. Today, millions of tins are consumed annually across the United Kingdom, making baked beans an everyday staple whose American origins are often forgotten. A global journey. The story of canned baked beans illustrates how foods evolve as they travel across cultures. A bean first domesticated by indigenous farmers in ancient Mesoamerica and the Andes became the foundation of native North American cookery. European settlers adapted those traditions into the baked beans of New England. Industrial canning transformed a regional specialty into an international commodity, while British manufacturers reinvented it into the tomato-sourced version now recognized around the world. Behind every humble tin of baked beans lies a remarkable journey spanning thousands of years, multiple civilizations, and 3 continents. Far from being merely a convenient cupboard staple, canned baked beans represent one of history's most successful examples of culinary globalization, combining indigenous agricultural knowledge, European adaptation, and 19th century industrial innovation into a food that continues to nourish millions today.
Canned baked beans, a convenient and nutritious legume. Understanding their nutritional value, health benefits, and potential drawbacks. Wednesday, 5th August 2026. AZLAN ADNAN, MA. Canned baked beans are among the world's most popular convenience foods, typically prepared from navy beans, haricot beans, cooked in a tomato-based sauce containing varying amounts of sugar, salt, and seasonings. They provide an inexpensive, ready-to-eat source of plant protein, dietary fiber, and complex carbohydrates. Most commercial products are suitable for vegetarians, although some varieties include bacon, pork, or other meat products. While recipes differ between manufacturers, nutritional values remain broadly similar. Original, reduced sugar, reduced sodium, and no added sugar versions may vary in their nutrient profiles, but data from the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, Food Data Central provides a reliable nutritional baseline. Per 100 grams of plain or vegetarian canned baked beans, the average nutritional composition is approximately energy, 94 kilocalories, kcal, total fat, 0.4 grams, saturated fat, 0.1 grams, cholesterol, 0 milligrams, sodium, 343 milligrams, total carbohydrate, 21.1 grams, dietary fiber, 4.1 grams, total sugars, about 8 grams, protein, 4.8 grams, calcium, 34 milligrams, iron, 1.2 milligrams, potassium, 224 milligrams, magnesium, 27 milligrams, zinc, approximately 0.7 milligrams. On an energy basis, canned baked beans derive roughly 79% of their kilocalories from carbohydrates, 18% from protein, and only 3% from fat. Their high water content, approximately 72 to 73%, contributes to their relatively low energy density. A typical serving of half cup, about 130 grams, provides approximately 120 to 150 kcal, 0.51 grams of fat, 27 to 30 grams of carbohydrates, 5 grams of dietary fiber, 6 to 7 grams of protein, and a substantial amount of sodium, depending on the brand. A 1 cup serving, about 250 grams, supplies approximately 235 to 245 kcal, about 1 grams of fat, around 54 grams of carbohydrates, 10 grams of dietary fiber, 12 grams of protein, and may contain over 850 milligrams of sodium, representing a significant proportion of the recommended daily intake. Nutritionally, canned baked beans offer several important advantages. They are an excellent source of complex carbohydrates and dietary fiber, both of which promote digestive health, improve satiety, and help moderate post-meal rises in blood glucose. Their protein content, although lower than that of meat or soy products, contributes meaningfully to daily protein intake, particularly when combined with cereals such as wholemeal bread or brown rice, creating a more complete amino acid profile. The beans also provide useful amounts of several essential minerals, including iron, magnesium, potassium, and zinc, together with B group vitamins, especially thiamine, vitamin B1, which supports normal energy metabolism. Another nutritional strength is their extremely low fat content. Canned baked beans contain virtually no saturated fat and are naturally free of cholesterol, making them compatible with heart-healthy dietary patterns. Despite these benefits, consumers should be aware of several nutritional considerations. The tomato sauce used in most commercial products often contains significant amounts of added sugar and sodium. While the sugar content is modest compared with confectionery or soft drinks, regular consumption of large portions may contribute appreciably to overall sugar intake. Sodium is generally the greater concern, particularly for individuals with hypertension, cardiovascular disease, or kidney disorders. Fortunately, many manufacturers now produce reduced sodium, no added salt, and no added sugar varieties. These products retain most of the nutritional benefits while substantially lowering sodium and sugar levels, making them preferable choices for health-conscious consumers. Recipes differ considerably between brands. For example, some original-style baked beans may provide around 150 kcal, 12 grams of sugars, much of which is added, and approximately 570 milligrams of sodium per half-cup serving. Products containing bacon, sausages, or richer sauces generally contain higher amounts of fat, sodium, and energy than plain vegetarian varieties. As with all processed foods, consumers should read the nutrition information panel rather than assuming that all brands are nutritionally identical. Serving sizes, ingredients, and nutrient contents can vary substantially from one manufacturer to another. Overall, canned baked beans remain one of the healthier convenience foods available. They combine the well-established nutritional benefits of legumes with exceptional convenience, offering a valuable source of plant protein, dietary fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Choosing reduced sodium and lower sugar varieties further enhances their nutritional profile, making canned baked beans a practical and economical addition to a balanced diet.
The author has placed this work in the public domain. It may be freely imported, exported, shared, distributed, edited, modified, or reformatted without explicit consent from the author. As a visually impaired person, the author asserts his rights under the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled. 2013, WIPO.INT.